Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about Alex Murdaugh and how he seems to have justified what he did.
I think if you watch carefully, there are signs he's lying, but considering the gravity of what he did, he does remarkably well at acting innocent. How is he able to feign innocence with such confidence in court? When the police arrived at the scene, he did an okay job at acting like the horrified, grieving family man, even though he'd just killed them.
Central 717 scene is secure. Got a Whiskey Fox, Whiskey Mike, both gunshot wounds to the head.
Sir, I wanted to let you know because of the scene, I did go get a gun and bring it down here.
It's in your vehicle? Do you have any guns on you at all?
No, sir. It's leaning up against the side of my car.
Okay. You're fine, man. You're fine. Turn around for me.
I don't have any.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see that. Okay. This is your wife and son?
And son.
Okay.
It's bad. It's bad. Check the pulses.
Yes, sir.
How did he manage to get into that headspace of acting so soon after doing something so drastic? His son was apparently shot once in the chest, and then he actually walked slowly forward towards his father, facing his father, before Alex Murdaugh shot him again and killed him. So it seems that his son thought he would be able to stop him. He trusted that his dad couldn't kill him. How could Alex Murdaugh bring himself to shoot his son when he's facing him and walking towards him? If you think about it, if he didn't accept his crimes, if he didn't feel okay with what he'd done, it would be a lot harder for him to try and think on the spot, to keep this act up, in order to try and make sure he didn't go down for his crimes. There's a psychology term called self-justification. When we have to make a really hard decision, we end up justifying it after we've made it in order to make ourselves feel more at ease with the decision we've made. And the harder it is to make that decision, the more we justify it after we've made it. In 1956, a psychology student called Jack Brem did an experiment on people making difficult decisions. He wanted to know whether they would convince themselves they'd made the right decision. First of all, they had to rate different items in terms of how much they liked each one. The items were his wedding gifts, and they were all things that could be used in the kitchen, like toasters and kettles. After they rated the items, they were told that they were allowed to take one home, but it had to be one of two that they'd given the same rating to. So that's what made it such a hard decision. What he found was that people who first of all liked two items equally ended up significantly preferring the one that they picked. You can see on these graphs that first of all they felt the same about the two objects, and after they'd made the decision, the one they didn't pick they suddenly liked less, and the one they did pick they liked a lot more. Having to make that decision created a bias in them, where they suddenly felt more strongly about each item than they had done before making that decision. At the end of the experiment, Brem had to admit to the other students that they couldn't really take anything home because they were his wedding gifts. And it was all a bit unfortunate because one woman apparently cried. What this means is that the harder the decision we have to make, the more torn we are between two courses of action, the more we're going to try to convince ourselves afterwards that we made the right decision. And not only that, but the more we're going to believe that.
Let's say you're doing really well and you're choosing between a BMW and a Tesla. So, you're not sure which one you're going to get. It's an amazing model of each that is, a comparable price. Well, you might first of all spend several weeks, or months looking at loads of different versions of the BMW and of the Tesla, different colours, slightly different models. Let's say you go with a Tesla. From that point onwards, suddenly you become certain that you made the right decision, and you will notice Teslas everywhere. You'll notice them in magazines, you'll notice them on the roads, you'll be thinking about your new Tesla, and you'll stop thinking so much about BMWs. That's your brain's way of making you feel at ease with your decision. So self-justification when it comes to buying a car is not really a problem. But when it comes to a moral decision, although I guess you could say buying a car could be a moral decision, especially with the way Elon Musk is behaving. But then again, a Tesla is better for the environment probably, so...
When it comes to Alex Murdaugh, his decisions to steal and murder both involved a lot of risk. The more risk involved in a decision, the harder it might be to make, and therefore the more you'll justify it afterwards. This means that somebody who commits these crimes is not going to see them in the same way you might.
There are so many different aspects of his behaviour that line up with antisocial traits. Somebody with antisocial personality disorder is going to see the world and themselves differently. It's going to be about what's in it for me and how can I get what I want, even if it's to the detriment of everyone else. And when they do something bad, they can recognise that, you know, in most people's eyes, they have done something bad. They can know that legally they would be thought of as a criminal, but that doesn't have to change the perception they have of themselves. It doesn't have to mean that they see themselves the way you or I see them.
Just like you or I, they can feel okay with what they do as long as they can justify it.
So let's look at an example. Say you're on a diet and you've promised yourself you're not going to have any chocolate cake for the whole week. And then you end up having a little slice of chocolate cake and you justify it because you tell yourself, well, my friend Marjorie would have been really offended if I hadn't had a bite of her birthday cake, you know. So you could just decide that, well, it was worth doing that. It was okay. I'm still a good person. I'm not a failure. For Alex Murdaugh, he can do that with really extreme things. So when he talks about the money he stole, for example, there are two different things he says about this.
One of the reasons these land deals cause me trouble is because the people that I was in these deals with no longer could pay, whereas I might have gone in and I was a 20% person. I'm now all of a sudden, either I have to default at the bank and affect credit, affect ability to borrow, or I have to pay 100%.
To cut a long story short.
So what you're telling me is you felt like you were entitled to steal from him?
No. You know what? I will tell you this. Barrett had owed me so much money that when I took his money, I just didn't tell him. So it was a lie by omission.
Inside his own mind, he's decided that his friend owed him a lot of money because he had ended up investing more than he'd planned to. And he's just taking back the money he very generously lent his friend.
Before admitting this, he did a little speech.
You know, when you're doing the things wrong that I was doing, you have all kind of ways of justifying it. And I'm not saying that makes it right by any means, because it's not. It's wrong. I've said that 100 times. But when I was doing it, and I was as addicted as I was, and the things I was doing, there's all kind of things that you know, to be able to look yourself in the mirror, you lie to yourself.
But although he's just acted like he used to justify bad things and he doesn't anymore, he just has. He's still using the word owed, as if the money has been a loan and not an investment.
Barrett had owed me so much money that when I took his money, I just didn't tell him. So it was a lie by omission.
So again, you know, he can justify that. He can tell himself, well, I'm not really a liar to my best friend. I just didn't go into that subject.
So he still thinks he was a perfectly good person to have stolen the money. And the whole reason he's talking about this is because that's how he wants the jury to view him as well. So this whole idea about how he shouldn't have justified this is just for show.
Here's the other way he justified stealing money.
I may ask a partner, okay, how much is this case worth? And if one of my partners, and I may not even give them all the real facts, okay? So if they said this case is worth $100,000, okay, and I go out and I get them $300,000, you know, that's one of the stupid, little things, okay, well, this isn't the same. And that's one of those justifications that I use.
So he asked his clients how much money they expected to get, and then when he got more than that and gave them what they had expected, he justified stealing the rest of the money by telling himself, well, they didn't think they were going to get any more anyway, so they're not going to be disappointed. I'm not actually doing anything bad to them because they're happy they got what they wanted. So you can see how in both of those situations, he comes out in his eyes as still a good person. If he feels a need to justify stealing, imagine the need he'll feel to justify murdering his family. And given that he would have had to have planned all of this in advance, imagine how much time he's had to believe his own justifications. And this leads me to what he says about the murder of Maggie and of Paul. He's asked, did you murder Maggie? And his response was, I would never hurt Maggie. So he doesn't say no. He doesn't use the word murder. I think that's really important. I would never hurt Maggie. And he talks about how they were hurt. He often uses that word hurt. So he doesn't have to say murder, because if he says murder, then he is a murderer. And he then has to face that about himself. But if he thinks of it as that they were hurt, which is a lot less, and that he wouldn't hurt Maggie, then what I think is happening is, in his mind, she has less pain because of what he did. So he didn't give her more pain. That's what I think he's doing. Even though he's obviously not saying that out loud because he's trying to say that he didn't kill her. But I think in both of those cases, with both Maggie and Paul, that the reason he can say, I didn't hurt them, I wouldn't hurt them, over and over again throughout the trial and just before he's, just before he hears the verdict, I think the reason he can do that is because that's what he has told himself. That is how he's justified this. His son was about to go through a court case. One of his friends had died falling off his boat because he'd been driving it blind drunk, and he had hit a bridge. So she'd fallen off the back and died, and she was just a kid. I think she was 19. Everyone knew that Paul Murdaugh was driving it because all the other witnesses had survived. But Alex Murdaugh pretended that his son wasn't driving it. He tried to say that somebody else was. And the prosecution had found a way to prove that Paul was the one who was driving by the direction that people fell in. So Paul was most likely going to lose that case. And on top of that, lots of financial information would have to be divulged to the public during that case. So that would have been very shameful for Alex Murdaugh. At that point, all of this stuff was just about to come out. So there were lots of reasons why Alex Murdaugh wouldn't have wanted that trial to go ahead. But on top of those reasons, there was the fact that his son most likely would have ended up in jail for quite a long time. And so he could have told himself, well, he was saving his son from having to go through that. Paul was an alcoholic. He would abuse his girlfriend. He couldn't get on with women. He wasn't ambitious like his brother Buster, who wanted to follow in his father's footsteps into law. Paul would probably never make anything of his life. So he was saving his son from having to screw up his life anymore. From the pain of having to be in jail, from the shame, all of that humiliation, and being far from home, locked up with people who might beat him up, I believe that this is what he said to himself, because he has this pattern of behaviour of justifying the things he's done and of making himself feel like they were acceptable, even though that wasn't, in my mind, his motive at all for killing him. It makes me wonder if he was actually saying this stuff to his son before he killed him. Is that why Paul walked towards him? Was he trying to reassure his dad that he was going to be okay? And his wife Maggie was just about to find out about the extent to which he had stolen money. And, that was just about to come out.
So the reality was that she was probably going to go ahead and divorce him. She'd apparently already been talking to a lawyer about divorcing him, and they were apparently living separately. But in his mind, I imagine he could have justified murdering Maggie because she would have been devastated when she'd found out the true situation they were in financially. She had already confided in her housemaid about how she didn't think Alex was being honest with her and she was worried about their financial situation. So he could well have told himself that he was saving her from a lot of heartache. He was saving her from a very uncertain future as she neared her 60s. With a husband in masses of debt who would lose his income and possibly go to jail. And finally, he was saving her from the pain of watching her son go to jail. If someone abuses you, they will justify why. And for that reason, they will feel no remorse. So if they say they're sorry, the likelihood is they're just saying that so that you will accept them in your life and they can carry on treating you in exactly the same way. So I hope that was helpful. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.
You're relaxing, darling. Yeah, you're good at that, aren't you? Yes, you're very good at relaxing. That's right. It's comfy, isn't it? Yeah. Do you like keeping your arms in the air, darling? You could just lie there all day, couldn't you? If you didn't have to play. But sometimes playing gets in the way, doesn't it? Sometimes you just have to play, don't you? And you find yourself looking for all sorts of things to play with, don't you? And you can play with lots of different things. Yeah, you can. And now you start to fall asleep. You're getting sleepy. You're getting sleepy. Your eyes are closing. Yes, they are. Oh, waking up again. You're waking up again. Go to sleep. Go to sleep, and then I can make a video because you're going to be so quiet, aren't you? Yeah. Yes, you are. Good night, baby. Good night, darling. Gently closing your eyes, aren't you? You're so good at relaxing. Yeah. Good night, baby. Good night, sweetheart. Think you're asleep, but you forgot to close your eyes completely, didn't you? Sleep with your eyes a little bit open.